Hey everyone, so today I'm going to be looking at how I can make Starlink work with the Alu-Cab Canopy Camper. Well, there's obviously a few things to consider, right? So this is going to be a two-part video. The first part is going to be looking at installation, particularly where am I going to actually place the dish. The second part is going to be about powering. How am I going to power the dish? Because I'm going to do a comparison between running it through the inverter. I've got a 3000 watt inverter, so I'm going to do a comparison about the amps that it pulls against the amps that it'll pull on a 12 volt system. I've got all the bits and pieces to run it through a 12 volt as well. So I'm going to do two videos, one for installation and one for a comparison of how I'm going to power the Starlink. So let's have a little go and start working on the installation. So we're going to have a look at some of the bits that I've got here. This is just a storage box I'm going to use as a little bit of a table for now, but let's have a little look to see what I've got, because I'm literally waiting for a delivery to arrive. Some delivery man should be coming through there hopefully in a little while to bring the last bits, and I've got to do it today because this Starlink has to be registered today. I have to put it online because I actually want to pause it, so it's got to work today. One way or another, this has got to work. So hopefully I can do the installation and I can run past the power options as well today, but I'll split the video between two. But let's have a little look. So I've got some parts, not all parts. There's two essential pieces of equipment that I'm missing, but let's have a little look to see what I have got already. So I've got my alternative router here to the Starlink router. I didn't actually purchase this. I had it through a rewards-based system. And what was the important part for me is whether the router is actually powered by 12 volt. And let's have a quick look to see at the back whether we have got an option for 12 volt. And if you can see clearly, you will see that it actually does say 12 volt at the back there. So that's going to be important because in order to run this on a 12 volt system, I need to have a different router, because the actual router that comes with Starlink empowers the dish with a 48 volt receiver. So I need to just power this with a 12 volt. Okay, so I've got my router sorted, and I'm pretty happy with the router. It's a really, really nice router, and even though it was from a reward system, I'm going to try and make it work. Okay, so I'll tell you what that is in a moment, and you can see that I've got a case here that I'm going to try and put the 12 volt system in. Nothing in it at the moment, and what will happen is that the various parts for the 12 volt, and I'll go through that when we are doing some of the parts of this and the installation for this. So that will be for the 12 volt system. This is part of the 12 volt system again. This is the step-up converter. And so what will happen is this has inputted the 12 volt that comes from the battery and steps it up to 48 volt, so I can run the dish, because the dish is powered by 48 volts. So this steps up into what's called a PoE injector, and that will convert the cable to a power cable that runs the dish and will power it with the right power voltage. So that'll be used to step up the voltage. I have got a little fuse block here, just a small fuse block which I'm going to put inside there to help run the cables to power all 12 volts that's coming into that, and to make sure it's all fused as well. So that's for the 12 volt system, and that's for inside the actual case itself, because I'm going to be bolting the things or screwing the things to this inside that, and you'll see a little bit about my plans for the installation for that a little bit later. So this is an option. I'm looking at this to when I put the router inside the box here, there's ports at the back of the router which are all female ports, and what I'm trying to avoid is that you need to open up the box every time you want to connect something. So I'm looking at this being an access point which will come out through the side of the box, so I can use it as a cable option from the router to there, so I can plug it in and have direct cable connection as an option. So that's why that little piece of equipment is there. But here we go, let's have a little look at what's in here, because hopefully we'll have everything that we need. Okay, so what I've actually added something extra. Obviously, I've opened the box already, and I've added a little something extra into this, because when I bought this from Starlink, what I looked at was how am I going to fix it, and this was one of the options that I'll be looking at, and this is the pivot mount. So what you can see here is that you control the actual angle of this particular foundation post here by undoing this, and then this will rotate, and you can fix this into the position that you need, and then just literally place the Starlink directly into it. So that was one of the things I was looking at, and then thinking about if I could fix this, where I would fix this onto the car there. So that's part of my main problem, is how I'm going to fix this onto the car, because I think this is probably the best option for me at the moment. I've got options, and I'll run you through that in a few seconds. So that's the pivot mount. It's the bag that came with the pivot mount and some of the fixings that's there as well, ready for the actual mounting it. So you can see, here we go, Starlink dish, and when I take the foot stand out underneath the dish, quite a long cable, and I'm reluctant at this stage to cut the cable. There are, if you have a little look at this, this is the power cable that comes with it to power the router, and this is looking at making sure that the router itself, which will be looking at 48 volts coming out of there to go to the dish, and that's what we'll do a test run with this, and we'll set it up with this, but we'll be looking at the amps that this pulls against the amps that the other router and the management system from the 12 volt will pull, and we'll do a comparison and we'll go from there. So I've come to the back of the Alu-Cab, and this is where the space I have at the back. You can see that I've got two 200 watt panels there, which I'm very happy with what that's pulling at the moment. 300 amp hour battery. We'll do another video about that another time. But what we've got here is, this is the pivot mount, and so my options are very limited up this end. So there's only a bit of space. I'm feeling a little bit uncomfortable with pulling down into this, but that is an option. I was wondering whether or not I could come off the actual aluminium frame that I've got here, perhaps even build another frame, just a small one, just specifically for this. That is an option I'm seriously considering, and it sort of comes up like that. Bearing in mind that the dish needs to have a little bit of space in order to do its bit around here. It's going to tilt, it's going to spin, and so it shouldn't really be obstructed. And the benefit of putting it this way compared to this way is that the Alu-Cab will tilt up. So the whole roof is a rooftop tent, and it tilts up at an angle. So by putting this here in this way, it'll be this particular vertical pole here will be tilted at an angle that way, and I would like this to be as vertical as possible. So ideally, if the tent tilts up at an angle, putting it this way I can adjust, which is why I looked at the pivot mount. I can adjust this so as the whole tent is up on an angle, this could be adjusted to be vertical. So that was one of the reasons why I wanted to look at the pivot mount for this. I'm just coming this way. What I've got, what you're unaware of, is I've got a shower fitting here, which coming around here, I've got some buttons for a pump, water pump, because I've got a tap up there, filter tap, and I'll talk to you about that another time. And there's a switch to power the shower unit is in here to power the shower cube. However, what possible options I've got is, I don't know if you can see here, there is a channel through here, which I'm wondering whether or not the pivot mount could have bolted up to that, and then when you loosen up the actual pivot itself, so it becomes straight up at an angle, and do an extension in here that goes up to the top there. So that was one option I'm considering, and of course what will happen is, if you look at the angle of where those bolt fittings are, they need to fit into the channel, so that would happen, and it would fit generally flush to this here, but it would come into the part where the actual wing of the Alu-Cab would open, and there is a misalignment, so I'd either have to cut this, which wouldn't be an easy job, or find a way to extend this out and move it to one side by drilling more holes, etc, etc. So that is not an ideal option, but maybe a plate here that this plate's on. But that is an alternative here for mounting the pivot mount. Okay, so I've come up to the other end of the canopy. So you can see I'm now at the front end of the vehicle here. I have got a basket at the top here for storage, a high lift jack at the front, perhaps questionable for location, but it does work, and it does give a good balance for the actuators when the rooftop tent works, so it doesn't overbalance. It's right at this end and works quite well. However, the options for placing the pivot mount, there are a few locations here, and this is quite an interesting one, because originally one of my plans was to actually place it inside the actual framework here and fix it by bolts, whether it would be there or further down, bring it to as far in as I possibly could. That is what I considered to be quite a serious option, and probably a really valuable option. And again, as the tent tips up, I can adjust the pivot so that it becomes vertical, and which would be a good sign. Perhaps the negative side that I could think of is that even though the dish would come up a little here, obviously what we're talking about now is that the tent itself also comes up, so I'm a little bit concerned that there may be interference, but not overly, just a little bit aware of what that could be. Another option, as you can see here, there is an actual rut here, down here, and this is something which is to me very possible. I certainly have some bolts that I can fix into this and put some bracings underneath the mount here, and it wouldn't interfere. The dish would come up, doesn't interfere. I can still have use of the basket here, I can still have it angled here, and so this becomes possibly my favourite position at the moment, but I would need to brace where this would go. So I'm going to spend some time thinking about it, whether I locate it here, here, at the side of the Alu-Cab, or at the back of the actual rooftop tent. Let's get some ideas together and let's see where we think would be the best place. Obviously, the way I run the cable is going to be important, but there are options. Underneath this, for example, could be an option. But let's get together and sort this out. Okay, so what we've got here is, for now, I've just bolted it down with these bolts here. This is a bit difficult to tighten up this bolt, so I've got to work on getting a ratchet to actually fit over that. It's quite tight at the moment, so it's quite solid. Really, I can shake the vehicle. It is really, really solid here just by tightening up this, but it's only sitting on this rail here. So I will be doing, if this is the permanent space for this, I will be doing some padding that will go underneath, that will rest on here and rest on the inside, so this becomes more firm and steady as an extra precaution anyway. But if that's the place for it, this will mean that I can pull it down and adjust the angle as the rooftop tent angle comes into play, so that I can make this vertical, and that's why I went with the pivot mount from Starlink to make this work. As an extra note here, you can see that I've put this this on this side, triangled it out on this side and not on the left hand side of the vehicle. It is a right-handed drive vehicle, but the main reason for this is that you may see another item over there attached to the cage. No, this is an extendable pole, and that's where I'll be putting a GoPro on the vehicle as well, because as we're on our drive around the world, having a GoPro right up there facing the front, a 360 GoPro would be fantastic. Obviously be aware of the height, but it will be amazing. So I didn't want the dish to come into view with that, and so or in conflict, so I'm trying it on this side. Alright, let's just give the satellite a bit of a position and see if this is the place for it to be. So here we are with the dish in the pivot mount, and there's a little play in the way in which the pole from the dish fits into the pivot mount, but it's not the play in the pivot mount itself, it's the actual pole in the pivot mount. So there's a little bit of play there, but this isn't going to be in motion use, this at the moment anyway. This is just for standard residential use, or rather I should say roam use, and so we will be stationary when we use the Wi-Fi. So the router right now is cabled down, right down here, and it's plugged into my inverter, which is down here, and I'm about to switch my inverter on and see what happens. So hopefully power will come. But I've also hooked up, you can see I've got a lot of electricals going on here, and I've hooked up a meter up here which I can actually monitor the amps it's going to come from, which is powering up this Starlink here, so I'll be able to measure how many amps are going to come through. Also, secure network. Create a network now. Cooking with gas. Enter Wi-Fi name. I'm going to enter Wi-Fi name, but I'm sorry, I'm not going to tell you guys about it, so I'm going to put you to one side for a minute. For you, I've done my password, and I've entered in the Wi-Fi name. Come across here, select, setup, connect, done. Starlink paired successfully. Tap continue to finish settings. Determine location. Software update. Oh, tap to update your Wi-Fi software now. Looks like I gotta update the software. Okay, let's see. Look, it's online. It's online. I've asked it to. Oh, and there you go. Look at that. And that is the speed test. So, that's not looking too bad, is it? I now need to check if this is picking up signal. Okay, let's see if this will play. Okay. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to finish off the installation for that, and I am not going to permanently fix cable at all, because I'll be taking the dish up and down, but that only the pivot mount will be fixed permanently. I'm going to make some decisions about the type of power that's going to be powering the Starlink. Okay, thanks very much. Look out for the next video on whether it's wise to use the inverter or whether to use 12 volt.